Everything we know, from people and ants to stars and galaxies to quarks and atoms, the entire universe, might just be a simulation running inside a supercomputer inside an even bigger universe. Ancient philosophers said that the universe is a dream that we're waiting to wake up from. In this dream world of the imagination, anything is possible. All cultural items, from the dreams of our rodent-like ancestors, to books, to television shows, are merely permutations of the reality we think we live in. Today's age of computers and video games places simulations at the center of our cultural consciousness. A select group of us perform simulations for fun and profit, and we call them games, role-playing and otherwise. We live to run simulations. Join us on the Simulationist podcast as we explore our culture of simulations.
Hello and welcome to another iteration of the Simulationist podcast. Today is the 16th of April, 2013, and this is number 32. I am Josh Trelevin. With me, as always, is
Ryan Kirkby, who keeps thinking it's 2012 for some reason.
Oh, I wish it was 2012. You know, 2012 was a good year, so...
Well, it wasn't that bad a year for me.
I guess I should say it was a good year in some ways.
It was a good year for you personally.
Personally, yeah.
I don't know, maybe I was just so let down by the apocalypse that never happened in 2012. I want to put the next couple of years as a 2012s, and so that way maybe we can combine all the stuff that happened and say that was a nearly apocalyptic year. It took 5 years to finish that year, but oh boy, that was a nasty one.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But it's kind of like the Game of Thrones, kind of how they have a, 12-year winter or whatever.
Yes. Well, it actually segs perfectly into our topic idea for this iteration. Is we did mention it a few months back when we were thinking about ideas. For 32, because there are no months with 32 days in the year, we should talk about alternative calendar systems.
Alternative calendar system.
But first, I would like to do a little bit of conspiracy thoughts and what's going on in the news.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. For those of you who aren't in Canada or in BC necessarily, you may not necessarily see the ads popping up now on TV, radio, and internet. Because currently in BC we have two different election cycles starting up. The federal government election cycle is starting up now, 2 years away, but it's still starting up. Then the attack ads are out. Hooray, woo, yeah.
Oh, attack ads.
Yes, because there's nothing that really makes you want to do your civic duty like a bunch of ads that purposefully try to incite anger in specific people.
That's true. It does get you riled up. Gets you on your feet and out into the voting box if you're mad about something. That's true.
Sadly, it's an effective thing. But, for BC, we have an election in about a month. And so there's a whole bunch of other attack ads going in at a much more personal level.
It's funny, there's this misconception in the rest of the world that Canadians are all nice and polite and we always apologize to each other. But apparently our politics is pretty similar to...
we can get almost as dirty as the Americans sometimes.
Almost as bad as the Americans.
I don't think we've necessarily hit some of the depths some of their super PAC ads have hit. There have been some pretty low blows there I've seen over the years. But we seem to be trying very hard.
Yep.
And we're sorry that we're not that nasty yet.
We're sorry. Well, so, I guess. I mean, there is something to be admired in that, like, ruthlessness of the, going for it with because it's like, it shows that you're passionate if you're going for, I guess.
Or afraid. Because, if the attack ad doesn't go just the right way, or if you're, watching it and you're not the target demographic to get angry at it, it really looks pretty darn petty.
Because we're, as Canadians, we're supposed to be like so confident and so like proud of ourselves, like not proud, but sure proud and confident and like assured in our goodness and how awesome we are as Canadians that we don't have to mention it, which I just did, so I just undermined that.
What an un-Canadian
you are.
But I personally don't like attack ads. I find them very embittering.
Well, everybody says that. So, and I don't like on some level, I hate them too.
I think a lot of people don't like attack ads, and that's why some of Obama's ads were so great and so polarizing. Is because he spoke of a better tomorrow. Whether or not he's been able to do that, well, that's up to you to decide. But he had ideas that says we're going to go forward and we're going to make it a better day, and it was it was just so much more positive.
That's nice, but like
It was
I
like
have to
having
wonder.
a lemon. It's like after sucking lemons for years, having some oranges finally. It's just so much sweeter when compared next to each other.
But there's something to be said for that cynicism, like what I was saying earlier about how, scare people is saying, oh yeah, he's going to take away your rights and he's going to do this.
He's going to give them to the other people. He's going to give them their rights.
Yeah. But I guess that tactic, it's probably dying out. I don't know.
Well, it is getting called increasingly more often when it's being shown up here in Canada. This is an attack ad. It has nothing positive to add to the situation, and it doesn't even say how the party that's supporting it would do a better job. They're just knocking down the other guy.
Yeah.
So that gets called. But I like to try and take something more out of an attack ad than just the bitter cynicism and the vitriol that seems to be what they're aiming for. Because I find these to be masterpieces of conspiracy theory.
Ah, yes. They pick one little tiny nugget out of what somebody says.
They'll have a whole interview with a person, and then these guys will go through and they'll look for just specific statements, and then they'll take them out, and in isolation they look bad. They're like, oh, this person said that, and then they won't bother mentioning the relevance of it or what context it was used in. And so I like to figure this. It's whenever you see an attack ad, think of it from that perspective. Think of it as being the end product of this conspiracy of trying to find the worst in a person, especially when it doesn't actually exist.
Yeah. So one day I'm gonna run for prime minister as the head of the gaming party. The party that's gamers, because in 20 years the whole the world is gonna all be gamers. Anyways.
Yes.
And so I don't want people taking what I say on this podcast out of context.
Oh, but trust me, I'm sure if we could go back through the previous 31 iterations, we could find some lines that just pointed. Yeah. I remember you saying how you don't like farming. Oh my goodness, would that get you ousted in the prairie provinces?
I guess I can't run in the prairie provinces.
You would have to fly right over Saskatchewan because they would never let you land.
Yeah. Oh, I'm tempted to say horrible things about Saskatchewan. No, we love our listeners in Saskatchewan. I don't want to say anything bad.
And we feel very sorry for them that they can't find somewhere else to live.
Yeah, and I hear in Saskatchewan it's still winter, whereas in Victoria it's basically summer now.
We never really had a winter this year. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, actually, we're not sorry on that. It has been beautiful this last year.
Well, in some ways I miss the winter. I really like the snow.
I miss playing in the snow, but I don't miss the winter itself.
Yeah.
So... yeah, okay, I'm not sorry on that. I'm sorry that I'm not sorry, but that's how it goes.
Oh, boy. A sorryception.
Yes. We're getting way too Canadian on this one here.
Okay, any more?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's just a nice little thing to mention that anytime you see an attack ad, don't give in to the hatred, unless you feel like it. I'm not going to tell you what to do, what not to do. But it's a nice way to look at it as seeing it the final polished product of people searching through and finding these little snippets, which is what a good conspiracy is from. You ignore the huge swaths of details and find the little bits that work with you.
Yeah, and I don't think we've mentioned which party has made the attack ads, because I think they go both ways. I think both, sides of the aisle will do it.
I don't recall the Green Party doing anything about attack ads.
Well, what you do see of attack ads is you see, environmentalists doing, ads against the oil sands. They show the picture of how the horrible destruction in northern Alberta, which sometimes it's overblown, but also that's true that it does cause damage.
It's not a zero ecological effect.
Yeah,
there's some negative in there.
But the only point I want to make is no matter what party you are, I think you ought to, or what party you side of the aisle you follow, I think you ought to look at those attack ads and examine that and have that same thought about them. It's not just the right attacking the left that you should.
The moderates attacking the extremists,
or the left attacking the right, or any side can use that tactic of picking out one little piece. So the thing is, I guess you just gotta do your research or whatever.
Which hey, I'm all for that. An informed voter makes better decisions. That's what I say.
So yeah, here I am telling everybody else to research, but I guess I'm going to have to follow my own advice and do a little more reading, because we do have an election coming up and I want to be informed for that.
Although I do believe the Green Party's ads about the other parties is basically just saying, look at them. We're the only people you can vote and still fall asleep secure at the end of the night. Because we haven't done all that yet.
Yeah, they don't have that track record yet.
Of course, mind you, they don't have a lot of history of actually being in office. I believe they only got their first person in with the last BC election, with the Elizabeth May.
Well, as far as the Canadian
So congratulations to anybody in the Green Party who's listening to that. Way to go on getting your first seat in there. So hooray!
Yeah, of course the Green movement, the environmental movement, which I guess is a little harder to define, but it's
because it's one of those aggregate ones. Anybody who wants to have a part can go in on it, so you can have conflicting views as to what constitutes part of the Green movement.
Yeah,
a lot like
true.
feminism in that way. A
lot
lot of people, they're all aiming for generally the same sort of thing, but where they want to stop and where they want to keep going tends to vary a lot between people. So
yeah, you can have some heated arguments even within what you might call like one group. Yeah.
So.
But gamers never have arguments. Star Trek, Star Wars? No.
Which actually brings me back to something I was going to ask. If you're going to be part of the gaming party, how do you plan to actually unite the card floppers, the dice chuckers, and the button mashers?
Oh, I haven't thought that far ahead. I'm going to use my incredible charisma. That was a joke, I know.
Well, I suppose you could always try coming up with a game that perfectly utilizes all three, and then force everybody to unite under that banner.
Yeah, like a forced game that everybody has to play.
Or no, if you make the game well enough, everybody will want to play it.
Yeah.
So, I'm just thinking. Just trying to put out ideas here, I want to be part of your party one day.
I wonder, like, in the future, this is probably not in our lifetimes, but there might be a virtual reality that's so, like, immersive that it eats all other entertainment. Like, can you imagine it? Because we have so many different kinds of media and different ways to consume, like, what we call simulations on this show and that. Like, do you think in the future there might be just one medium that everything is done in?
Maybe when we get that holodeck working to the same standards that they show in the Star Trek series. But maybe then. But even then, it'd still be pretty divisive, I think.
Captain Picard still reads novels. Like, he reads a physical copy of Moby Dick.
Yeah, I never understood that. He should have just been reading it on tablet, because,
Yeah.
How many times does the ship get hit with something without warning and then everybody goes flying off to the side? If you're on a tablet, you are going to be able to remember your spot, because the page doesn't close. You're reading the book, bam, book shut. What one of the 800 pages was I on? I think I was somewhere near the middle. Okay, sort out this problem, then come back to the book later on.
Well, you say it like it's a bad thing, but it sounds fun to me to be like reading and like you get a little bit of a review.
If you're deep into like the heart of the action, it can get kind of annoying to lose your spot. And it's like, now it's like having to start up, like a DVD and find, okay, what part of the scene was I at? Okay, which scene? Okay, I think it was this scene.
That sounds like so much fun to me. I don't know, maybe it sounds bad to you.
So, well, if you're really into it, it can get annoying. You want to get back into that action, man. You want to keep reading. You want to be exactly where you left off.
Okay, yeah, well, fair enough.
And, let's face it, they're in the far future. They should be able to have, a thing in those data pads, which, by the way, are actually pretty dang inefficient because each one would hold only one book. But that's something for another time. That's progress marches on.
Right.
But they could have something that monitors your eyes and tell exactly where you are. So when you put it down and go elsewhere and then come back, it would use the facial recognition. And then it would highlight, like, you're here. This is where you were. Like little arrows pointing at, oh, yes, that is where I was on the page. Thank you, book.
I think that's probably how it'll be, yeah.
I think that's how it probably should be, but whether or not it'll get there by the time, you're flying around in your starships, reading Moby Dick, I don't know.
And what's the...
Keep in mind, Picard really was kind of a classicist sort of person. Those were real fish he had in his aquarium, right?
Well, that's true. It's almost like he's keeping kind of museum pieces. Like, they don't really need those items or articles. But a lot of the characters in Star Trek would have things like, Worf had his bat'leth, Data had a cat, Riker had a saxophone.
Hey, I still say music will be important in the future. That saxophone may be an antiquated style, but it'll still be valid.
But, like, wouldn't you, in the future, wouldn't you just get a hollow sensor and just wiggle your fingers around? And
Well, see, that's the thing, is you'd have to work with the hard light system. Otherwise, it doesn't feel right. And then if you want to hit those really soft ends between the proper notes, I think you'd wind up messing that up.
Do you think if holodeck generated a reed, like, you know, the kind that goes in the mouthpiece of the saxophone, do you think that would taste like a reed? Like, do you think, and it would feel like it, or do you think that would...
See, no, they've mentioned them being all right, and then they're eating foods and all that, so there's got to be something for that, but I really don't understand why they'd ever put that in, because it's, okay, yeah, it adds to the simulation, makes it seem more real, but that seems like a lot of work for just a little extra oomph into your system. Wouldn't it be just a lot easier to have everything taste like solid nothing? Because it's all force fields and light.
Well, I imagine that the people who program the holodeck, they're probably super nerds, and they're probably like, we have to do this because it will be so awesome. A saxophone reed will taste exactly right, you know? You think
yeah, but then you're on because they never covered this bit on it, but then you have the chance of saying, holodeck, put the flavor of 20 habanero insanity peppers on Lieutenant Riker's tongue.
Could just beam it right in there.
And then you just stroll off, man. It doesn't even need to have anything there for it to produce the taste, because it's all whatever, you know, sci-fi explanation, technobabble they use.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden Riker's, it burns, and you just stroll straight out of that holodeck laughing because you have pulled a wonderful prank.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess it starts to break down, because I can't even imagine how...
Holodeck, get me some water, get me some milk. It would be beautiful. Just a wonderful, just jerk-ass prank.
Because peppers actually work by chemically binding to your tongue, right?
Well, it'd be the same as like force through, you know, their micro force fields and all that to produce the taste.
So they'd be producing micro force fields on the molecular level, basically.
I think that is how it works for stuff like taste there. Although I will admit I haven't read deep into how they've come up with an explanation for taste in the holosuites.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they have replicators, so I guess they can do that.
Or maybe they're just like sending like little concentrated beams into the person's head, and so they think they're tasting it that way.
It could be that, yeah.
In which case, the holodeck just sounds even more dangerous than ever.
Well, if you think about it, everything in Star Trek is quite dangerous. I mean, the transporter, have we talked about the transporter already?
I will never step on a transporter. I am not doing that.
Yeah, I think the world of Star Trek is quite fraught with sci-fi dangers.
Well, I remember one of their movies, Spock comes back after doing his meditation stuff, but before that... you know, they're going to move their ship out of dock and everything's going to go wonderful. And Kirk insists that he has to have, you know, like a Vulcan, you know, on the side for his command. Because he knows that, you know, you want the logical smarts. But the transporters weren't really ready, and so he dies in transport. It's the flagship of the Federation. And... they still can't get the teleportation working all the time without potential loss of lives as they're doing final last-minute testing.
Yeah. Well, do they have the transporter in Star Trek Enterprise, the series? The transporter now?
I must admit, I gave out on that one fairly early on. I'm not a die-hard Trekkie or Trekker, and so once things started getting, you know, away from their, it's all rustic kind of motif, I had lost a little interest.
Well,
also... studies. I was doing the university thing. I only have so much time in a day. I need to sleep.
Okay, I might have to look it up after the show and put a note in whether the...
But it's always been pretty damn dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yes, the holodeck, quite dangerous.
Everything. I mean, it's like the back end of a fast food restaurant there. Everything there can burn you, cut you, or do something other horrible to you. It's a very dangerous world they live in.
Yeah.
But they're so calm and somewhat, you know, like British debonair sometimes, just sipping tea.
Well, do you remember how I compared the frontier American culture, or I was comparing the crossing of the Atlantic, of, you know, the mass migrations over the Atlantic from Europe to America in the 1800s, or I guess I'd say before that even, because 1800s probably most people survived. But before that, it'd be like, half your crew could, in the 1700s, 1600s, half your crew could die of some disease, or your entire crew could die of some disease. And I imagine that Star Trek it tries to recapture that frontier spirit. I mean, that's, the final
At least
frontier.
the original series did.
Yeah, that was the idea.
Things were much more civilized by the time The Next Generation rolled out.
And yeah, The Next Generation was supposed to be this kind of modern. It kind of parallels the 80s, where things are modern and things are like.
I think they really focused on the optimism nature of things at that point, really, because it's really always been about the optimistic nature of humanity.
Yeah, but there's still that. I mean, this is the genius of Gene Roddenberry, is there's the optimistic future, but there's also this frontier spirit, and we're exploring, we're going where no one has gone before. This is dangerous.
Well, nobody in the Federation has gone before. They do find aliens that have been going all over the place all over the time.
Yes, that's true. Where no human has gone before.
No, well, I mean, technically, Spock's only half human, and so there were some other people on the ship that weren't technically human, so it'd be to boldly go where nobody from the Federation has gone before and return to give the data.
Okay.
Or data.
Less catchy,
given the nature of the character Data, I suppose data is going to have to be used for that.
Yeah.
Because then you get into some interesting semantic issues and confusion problems.
We're going out to the galaxy to collect data.
No, he's actually with us.
What are you talking about? He's right here.
Dude, he was on shift like 15 minutes ago. Where did he? Oh, no, we do have to go searching for data.
Or multiple datas. They had multiple datas, or like similar beings to Data.
Yeah, so that's the one thing I never did figure out, why they couldn't work on, okay, maybe not mass production, but more of an artisanal production of androids.
Well, I think they had one guy, doing it. Dr. Soon was his name, but, he didn't last.
Well, they had some other people, because I do recall some guys mentioning, you've got the Soong-type android configuration. Very interesting. So there were some other potentials for that. But once they said, hey, this guy works. This guy works really well. Can we ask for the schematics so we can keep that up? I think it would have been worth the effort.
He is he's a very awesome character. He's almost a superhero of Star Trek, right? Because he's got super strength and he's super smart.
Then again, so was Spock technically. He's supposed to have the Vulcan strength. He could kill a man if his passions were unleashed.
That's cool.
Which launched about 1,000 fanfics that way that I do not wish to get into.
That's always interesting. The contrast between Spock's, he's got this primal power, and yet, the Vulcans learned to control it. So
I did like that about the Vulcans. Okay, they seemed a bit like tools, but Spock had it going on.
Yeah.
You get a bunch of space hippies up on the original Enterprise, and they're all calling Captain Kirk like a Walter man, which is like a mid-level, guy that just takes orders from someone else. But Spock comes up to them, puts a triangle with his hands, and they're mellow with the guy with the ears, man. They are mellow. That was actually in one of the episodes. They actually had space hippies, and they were all cool with Spock. But they hated Kirk, because Kirk just seemed like, he's just an uptight guy. Spock is cool. Spock has got it going on. And the more I actually...
He is cool, literally cool.
The more of the episodes I actually watch now, the cooler he seems, because, he'll score a chick here, he'll hit some sort of, mental, plateau with this wonderful lady there. He's getting a lot more action in the episodes I've seen than Kirk has.
Well, I like Spock because he's kind of a nerd hero, because, nerds are very, they like to be scientific and logical, and they're also a little bit awkward socially, but they at times they can do cool things, like...
Nerve pinch.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, mind your mouths together. Whoa.
Yeah, and Kirk is definitely more jock-like.
Well, not the bad way, though.
Well,
he plays very well with the other personalities. I know that, which makes him actually not that jock-like compared to, I suppose my history of growing up with jocks.
Yeah, no. Well, I guess I don't know if I should say he's jock-like. I mean, he carries that stereotype of, because he is athletic and he's leader-like. He's a leader, so that he's got that aspect to him.
Although he is more of a, a fast and loose kind of leader. The rules are there, but he'll ignore them because, sometimes they don't always work.
Yeah, but would Captain Kirk put up with, like, a crew member just saying, yeah, the rules, but I know Captain Kirk ordered me to fix this transporter, but I'm just going to say screw it. And next thing you know, a couple people die crossing over.
Well, I think for Kirk, though, it was always whether or not it would endanger the ship. If it endangers the ship, he will smack you. He will just crack you across the jaw, and then until you get back. If you're 10 minutes late for your shift, he'll just say, hey, watch it, buddy. And then, now you're staying 10 minutes late. He seemed like that kind of guy.
I imagine, I think Kirk would have a fair amount of discipline on his ship. Like a person 10 minutes late, there's basically Starfleet has some regulation for what happens if you're late and you have to do this and that, or you get demoted, or I don't know if Sirius is demotion for being late, but
I don't think Kirk would sign the papers for a demotion for a guy being, late every once in a while.
Well, but Kirk also requires that kind of above and beyond spirit, if somebody...
Oh yeah, if the guy was coming in, just like whatever, if the guy comes in late, going, oh sorry about that, and then he does stay the extra time and he makes up for it, and he makes sure that this is not a chronic thing. Yeah. Kirk knows the value of a good mind and a good effort behind that, but he's not one to say, oh, well, you've been late 4 times. I'm going to have to give you a written suspension on this one.
Oh,
you keep that up, and that'll lead to more serious action, mister. That'll go on your permanent record.
I don't see Kirk as the disciplinarian in that sense, but I don't see him...
Spock might do it, though.
Yeah, I don't see him letting it go, basically.
Spock seems like he'd be a rules lawyer. It's illogical not to follow the rules. You have to take 1d6 for every 10 feet you fall.
I imagine, this may have happened in some of the shows or the fiction or whatever, but I imagine Kirk being saying something like to the crew member who's late or makes some mistake. I imagine him just saying I don't want to have to punish you, but I guess I do because regulations and also regulate. No, he wouldn't say regulations. He would say I don't want to have to punish you for
Starfleet
this.
protocol to say I'm supposed to give you a write-up on this one. I don't really want to do it though. So is there another way we can solve this? He seems like the kind of guy that would make you think, oh yeah, he's my friend. I'll work harder because I don't want to let him down.
Well, and
he plays that end of it.
That's something you do see in Star Trek. Is you see the younger officers. They really look up to Kirk and they really want to impress him. And I think this comes from, we have this in our culture in the military and stuff where the junior officers really want to put on a good face. And
for the captain that isn't like a jerk-ass, because I've got a number of people I listen to all over the world that will say, if that commanding officer is an ass, then you really can't have any respect for them. So
well, it's funny though. There's another it's funny because the response to the commanding officer who's a jerk and stuff is to be as pristine and by the book and by the numbers and everything is perfect as you can, just to I don't know, to stick it to them or whatever, you know what I mean?
Or if they wind up being anal retentive, they will write you up if this happens, in the proper procedure. And there, it's such sticklers to detail. There's the white mutiny, where you only do exactly as you're told. You don't take any extra initiative, and that drives those guys nuts apparently. And there's not a thing they can do about it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and I don't know because those commanding officers who are jerks, do you think it's because they're just not thinking, or do you think it's that they're doing a similar thing, they're being a little bit lax in
I think it's just a conflict of personalities. Not everybody gets well, along with everybody else. C'est la vie. That's kind of how life goes. In which case, if you were to get everybody at a gaming table that were all rules lawyers, you would have no problems because everybody understands these are the rules. Let's all follow them this exact way. Whereas if you have a group that's half rules lawyers and half more freeformists, that's when the conflict arises. So if you were to have a spaceship crewed all by Vulcans, you're not going to have much problem with that. They can talk out their thing and solve where these logical incongruencies are. But you get a crew that's half Kirks and half Spocks. My God, I'd be wondering if you could even get that thing out of port sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, the thing to be said about jerks in leadership position is, in some ways, like, it is a leadership style to itself. It might not be my style, but I can see it being like something that, you know, they're a jerk because they don't want to be buddy with the junior officers or the crew or anybody like that. They don't want to be too informal, so there's that.
Well, don't forget, there's also the theory that people who crave power will try and find their way into such positions, and thus those positions will be inordinately full of jerks craving power.
Yeah.
So, you know, in that case, it may not be necessarily that it's A causes B. It's just that this position attracts these kind of people you do not want to be around, because that's the only way they can get people to listen to them.
Mm-hmm. And they say it's lonely at the top too. So, like the higher up you get, the lonelier it is, I suppose.
I do recall the whole bit about Bill Gates being more deeply saddened by the loss of Steve Jobs than anyone else. Because when you're up there at that end of things, there's only so many people that can get up there and stay there. And so having that other person, even if they're like a competitor, to have that person there for so long, it is like losing your dearest friend.
Yeah, it's like Superman and Lex Luthor.
More like Superman and Batman. If one goes, the other would deeply mourn it, because that was the only person they could truly have some real connection to.
Do Superman and Batman fans fight?
The fans? Oh, hell yeah, especially when you ask who would win in a fight.
Who would win in a fight, yeah.
Despite the fact, if you go with the Silver Age, it's basically Superman crashes the moon into Earth, and then the Earth and moon into the sun. He wins.
Yeah, but... okay, are we going to have the Superman versus Batman fight? I've heard this done on many other podcasts before. But Batman would trick Superman into not doing that.
Well, here's
because
the thing.
He's got the intelligence.
It's Silver Age Superman. No, he actually does have the intelligence to see around that. And, well, heck, you can just say, at just slightly slower than the speed of light, he comes up to Batman and lasers 2 holes in his head with his wonderful heat ray beams. The end.
And Batman counters it because...
it's really hard to counter things moving at just slightly slower than the speed of light, because by the time you've seen it, they've basically already done whatever they want to. Although that does bring me up to the point of Superman using his heat ray beams in like flight when he's doing other things, because if those beams are moving at the speed of light, because they're like laser eye beams,
yeah,
and he's moving forward, doesn't he start burning his own eyes that way?
Well, he can't catch up to the speed of light because nothing can.
Well, actually, a lot of the different ages of comics, yeah, he can.
So Superman goes the speed of light?
Just under it.
Oh, there you go, just under it. So his laser eyes reach their target just before he does.
But doesn't that start hurting his eyes? Because he's got like the heat of the laser thing right there in front of him. And from what I've seen, that laser stuff actually can hurt Kryptonians. When he fights other Kryptonians, he'll use it.
You're right. They should go back and rewrite all those comics and have his eyes burn.
I'm just saying it wouldn't hurt to have a little interesting, things like that. Like he can't see very well, and so his laser eye beams miss a lot because anywhere he looks, it winds up suddenly becoming red. He's got lasers coming out of his eyes. He can't see in.
But if you're traveling near the speed of light, a lot of weird things happen. Like the shape of the universe basically changes according to your
compressing,
perspective. Yeah. And any light that you see would get shifted. I don't know if it's red shifted or blue shifted. I think ahead of you, it would.
I would love to see that in the Flash
shifted,
comics. Honestly, when the Flash is running so fast, he starts seeing the blue shift, and that's how you can tell how fast he's going by how weird out the colors start shifting out.
I don't read enough comics to know.
I haven't seen them do that sort of thing. They just usually do speed lines in the background and just don't have any details.
But that's a cool thought.
But which is almost a shame though, because the Flash stuff does utilize other relativistic effects, such as I recall him running around the planet to beat up a white Martian, and by the time he clocked the guy in the jaw, he was going just under the speed of light, so he had a fist that was, oh hey, almost infinite mass.
Yes.
Knocked the guy just, if he had been a little harder, could have knocked the bugger into orbit. But I think he hit him somewhere in North America, and the guy didn't touch down until he hit Africa. So that was a nice punch. So fun things like that.
But it.
All for the purpose of the story, I suppose. If you put all the
Yeah.
extra things in there, it becomes so much more effort for so much little extra payoff.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to that holodeck thing originally.
We're back at the holodeck, yes.
But yes, I suppose we've gotten off topic. I could like to say, though, in from the whole thing, is for the Star Trek thing, they have their star dates. 13.1, 13.8.
Right. Yes. Okay.
I've never properly learned the Stardate system, and originally they were just kind of making the numbers up and just adding higher numbers for later on in that episode.
Yeah. Well, I remember.
But
I know some of it.
They were able to come up with the fans were able to come up with a system of timekeeping, how that works for a Stardate system. Except for a few episodes where there was some inconsistencies, and then the people to say, "Oh yeah, it was an error, our bad. It should have worked as you guys said. Good job at catching us."
Yeah. Well, I think originally it was random, and then later on it was just by season.
It was like 13xx.x.
Yeah.
And I think that's how they worked with their Stardate system.
Yeah, and at some point it felt like you could basically, because they mention occasionally they refer to our calendar, and because they're in the 23rd century. Star Trek: The Next Generation is in the 24th century.
Yeah, but they have to come up with something else because they're going near the speed of light. They have some relativistic effects otherwise happening.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to tell the time when you're using a solar calendar, but you're no longer in that system.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you've been going faster than the speed of light, well, technically you'd go back in time or something like that.
Well, they utilize some subspace stuff.
Right, subspace.
So they don't have any of those problems going faster than light.
Yeah, and I suppose since they don't do time travel regularly, it must work out that subspace returns you back to the time. Like if you...
I just think it works that subspace has a higher maximum speed. Like the highest speed you can get in the subspace when you're going warp speed is several times faster than regular space's maximum speed. So you can wind up circumventing this, you can't go any faster.
So there would still be relativistic effects in subspace, but they would be less pronounced, basically?
That's how I've always interpreted it. Although I must admit I haven't gone to the Memory Alpha wiki and looked up the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's just how it seems to be from what I've seen over the years. I could be off. I do know they had to change how fast their warp system was at some point.
Yeah, well, and they have
like
they
what
do
what
that.
was warp 8 is now like warp 6 or less.
Oh, I see. Okay. Like in universe, they did that?
Yeah, in universe there was an old warp speed system and then a new warp speed system.
Okay.
So maybe they found a better subspace. Maybe there's several subspaces.
I imagine, if there's one other subspace, maybe there's infinite. Maybe there's infinite universes.
And then you just got to find a way to tweak it to find the best out of the subspaces. Heck, maybe you wind up hitting a subspace where the speed of light is like 30 kilometers an hour. No one goes to that subspace. That subspace is lousy.
Imagine like relativistic effects, like for just sitting on your couch, like drinking a glass of water or something like that. Just as soon as you start to move the glass, it gets heavier.
Okay, yeah. You've proven me wrong already. At 30 kilometers an hour, some of the things you could do with relativistic effects could have some very interesting changes in things. Like, because time slows down as you approach the speed of light, the more pronounced the effects are. So you could effectively have people just going through space at 29 kilometers an hour in subspace under this one and effectively be preserved. It'll take them forever to get anywhere, but for them, no time will have really passed. So you could have all sorts of weird little things like that. So, it's a way.
Yeah. Well, is that a thing that I think it's been mentioned before? But if you could approach the speed of light, you could make time slow down enough that you could visit all the stars in the galaxy according to your own perspective.
No, because with the speed of light, let's say you can't hit the speed of light just for the ease of mathematics.
Okay.
Or we'll say just 1, centimeter, per hour less than the speed of light.
Okay.
No, not any difference really between the two. But even then, a 4 light year trip will still take you 4 years.
4 years of your time.
I
right?
think so. I'd have to double check up on the math.
Yeah.
Things get really funky in ways that just aren't intuitive. So, yes, long story short, make sure you know what subspace you're on before things get really weird when you're trying to get to your neighboring star system.
Time would slow down. No, I think that 4 light year trip would feel shorter to you. I think it would. Or would it feel longer? No, if time slows down at near the speed of light. Or does time speed up? Oh, crap.
Oh, okay, so we've thoroughly confused ourselves on this matter. But let's get back to the point at hand. They utilize a time calendar that takes into account these relativistic effects and the fact that they are no longer in the star system that their calendar was originally based around. So let's face it, it's really hard to keep track of what time of the day it is when the star that you utilize to determine that is just another blip in the horizon.
That's true, but like in the Star Trek universe, wouldn't they be using like cesium atoms or whatever to measure time, basically?
But even if when everything slows down, the cesium atom would still wind up going at a slower pace. So that the whole thing just goes out the window. You have to have a really good system set up, which apparently they do. I don't know the very specifics of it. But that brings us into the topic, is calendars, different ways to do it. Because sometimes you want to really mark your fantasy, and it's a nice, easy way of showing how things are different in your fiction.
Okay, yeah.
I know for those out there who watched the reboot cartoon, animated series, back in the 90s, for them things happened in like nanoseconds. If it was going to take a whole long time for you to get something done, you go, oh no, this might take me a whole second to get done.
Yeah.
So they had a different way of measuring things. It was a completely different scale. They have no need for the term week, the way we interpret it.
Right.
That'd be the same way as us saying millennia. It's like, oh yeah, I'll get around to it next millennia, maybe. So yeah, it's a nice way of showing things, and showing the alienness of your fiction.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and the thing is, it signals to your reader like that they can't really take things for granted. If you say something, there's a 300-day year, they're like, okay, so some things I won't. They're gonna clue into this. Oh, I'm reading this fiction and I'm not going to be able to take everything for granted.
It is a nice, gentle way to decouple them from the reality that they are normally a part of.
Because that's something, when I read, like, I've been reading a lot of Conan stories. Well, not a lot, but I've been reading the first...
It's heavy reading. Even a little bit of it's very, very dense and very something you pick up on.
Well, it is very cool, and, like, it's interesting and an interesting new taste for me because I haven't read a lot of it. And
there's not a lot of people copying the Conan style the same way they're copying the Tolkien style.
Well, people have copied it, but they've definitely altered it because it's not very politically correct. That
no, I was going to leave that a bit alone. But yeah, I do like the concept that if you remove a society, from humanity, they start actually devolving. That sounds like you could do some really interesting things with that. Just take it away from apes, because that has some unfortunate real-world consequences, and people have utilized that for racial things. So
that's true. Well, I don't know. Like apes, you could get away with it. I mean, they've done Planet of the Apes. I mean, they've done that. And then H.G. Wells used it in The Time Machine. He used evolution like in a different way.
The Eloi and the Morlocks.
Yeah, he had humans evolve into two different kind of competing races that were not really, had nothing to do with apes. They're just...
but heck, you could make it for a D&D style thing where you remove humans from like a real structured society and they start becoming orcs. In which case, a half-orc wouldn't be a melding of the two. It would be a person so far removed from society that they're starting to regress to this orcish state.
Yeah. And my...
Regress or pervert, mutate, whatever term you want to use, depending on your perspective.
I've always thought, like, there's this contrast between some orcs are, like, the way people do orcs in fiction is, like, they're these demonic entities, irredeemable, they're born from slime, they're not human at all. And then others are like, no, they're just, they have their own tribal system, they're just a little more savage than humans, but, they're just people like us. I think Warcraft, like, the Warcraft series has orcs who are like, they have families and they have a culture and all that stuff.
They're at the very high end of orcish things.
But they also have that demonic influence. They're like...
That's why they're green.
Yeah.
Which is a nice way of explaining the green for them. I still want to see them include something with the goblins for why they might be green, aside from the Khajiit that they keep mentioning.
Have they mentioned where the goblins came from in Warcraft? Because I don't remember. I remember
they were
the
enslaved by monkeys, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, something like intelligent monkeys to mine the Khajiit, and they got smart from the Khajiit fumes.
Ah, sweet.
And then they overthrew the monkeys and I guess tossed them off the island, and they're starting to run out of their supplies, and they're not as smart or as ingenious as they used to be.
Ah, yes.
I may have to double check on some of the small end details on that.
So yeah, when I was reading the Conan stories, I kept on thinking, this, because he mentions lands that are sort of similar to lands. He's like, Argos and Stygia and...
Spoiler alert, the whole place that takes place there is actually Europe pre-flood.
Yeah,
so,
I think that's what it's supposed to be. But like places, like, I was looking at the map.
Hyperborea.
Like, trying to figure out where places are.
In the Asgard area.
Yeah. So, but he basically takes a lot of those, just the names from ancient culture. And
I do like the name Stygia. It has some very nice way of sounding. It rolls off the tongue very well.
Yeah, and then he just places them roughly like in a sort of like, doesn't even belong. And then it's
he had some fun with it, we'll say.
But then how did the cultures? I start to wonder how the cultures got from where they are in this Conan story.
Although, okay, I'll give you a spoiler thing I really liked about it. His sons of Shem.
Yeah.
Becoming the Shemites, who later become the Semites.
Yeah.
I totally didn't see that until they dropped the H. That was really well written. I never even saw the whole history of the sons of Shem being the Semitic people. Because boom, it's like, oh wow, yeah, okay. It's like, oh, nice writing there. I give you applause.
Of course, he has his own set of stereotypes associated with them, but I guess we forgive him. I don't know.
Well, it was really decent writing. I didn't see it coming until he actually came out and basically said it. So I'm willing to let that slide.
Okay, yeah.
But only because he wrote it well enough. If it had been lesser writing, no.
Okay, yeah.
So that's right. I give leniency to better writers. So, I think a lot of people do, really.
And the thing is, he used stereotypes and stuff like that, but he wasn't like outright racist or anything like that. It's just, and that's the way a lot of writers were. But like,
I think it was just a mixture of naivete combined with curiosity.
Yeah.
Well, let's face it, they didn't understand things the same way we do today about genetics and lineages and things like that.
That's true. Yeah.
For them, it was something else entirely. It was a little weird when you look back at them.
And they wanted to write about exotic places and exciting, larger than life, because they saw life in. Well, he was from America, but a lot of these writers, the traditions from kind of England and stuff.
Well, you can see that all the way up to Herge's Tintin.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's he admired some stuff of this, and that's why Tintin was going to these lands. But if you read it from this perspective and day and age, from here, it looks a little bad.
Yeah, there's a lot of different stereotypes of different
On the
nations.
other hand, he didn't have the internet, and he didn't have the clearly easy learning capacity that we do now. So, we have no excuse for that. Unless you're doing a parody thereof.
I don't know,
but you gotta be careful. Fine line there.
So if a writer today wants to be exotic and use some of these iconic ideals of, I guess Orientalism or, kind of like the mysterious East, can you get away with that?
I think there are better ways of portraying it than the ways of the previous generations.
Okay.
Just making sure you include that, they don't actually tell what, everything they are. Make sure things actually do stay mysterious, so that even when they're telling you something, you don't feel like you're getting all of the story.
Right.
You're only getting a portion of it. That will help keep the mysterious nature of it.
Yeah, that's good. And I guess if you make it clearly fictional, but on the other hand, you like George Lucas made a fictional race of swamp-dwelling people that turned out to be
Sound like racist, yeah.
Yeah, it sounded like I don't know where they're from, like Caribbean or
Well, I think there's a mixture of Caribbean in the accent there, but otherwise it was basically from the old Shirley Temple era type things. There was some Mr. Bojangles in Jar Jar's speak.
Yeah, and that's funny because like that's an example of them trying to capture that exotic, like something that's
I think that's why we give
epic.
George Lucas so much flack, though, is because in this day and age, you can learn the difference and you can learn the more subtle things about it that really captures the essence, as opposed to just the caricatures.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it on the main level, like where you're supposed to take the film in, it's an alien. It's not supposed to be any like anything related at all to humans. It's supposed to be completely weird and just out there. It's just, people pick up on little cues and they're like, wait a second, I think that's basically...
There are so many visual cues here, I can relate that to a group within some part of America's past.
Yeah.
For shame. If you'd done half of that, maybe it would have been better taken by the public.
But I guess, like, the other way you can go is, like, with Token and his orcs, and you can be like, because the orcs are they don't have much culture at all, like, they're just
They're
the bad
living
guy.
warrior machines, basically.
I guess they have some orcs with like Cockney accents and stuff, and they're like, "We haven't had bread for we've been eating moldy bread for 3 stinking days." That's my Cockney.
That's not bad. Actually,
No, it's not even. I don't even know if that's even Cockney. But anyways,
they definitely do have a various series of accents.
Yeah.
I think that's more just for humor's sake than that. I'm reasonably certain Tolkien never wrote any of the orcs with an accent.
Yeah, no.
So, I think that was just, for comedic effect. It's a storytelling, liberty they took.
Yeah. But, well, okay.
Yes, we got off on a few tangents there. But, basically, the calendar system is, well, heck... The calendar system we take for granted because it is a very good system. 365 days, except for every 4th year, in which case we add an extra day. But then there's some other ones that come by every 400 years. We don't really need to memorize that, as long as somebody remembers how the system works.
Yeah, somebody knows. Yeah.
By and large, you can live your entire life under this really, really convenient system. But then everyone remarks how they hate February because it's got only so many days in it. And if you get paid every other week, then it winds up being that it's a short month, so you wind up being short on money. Whereas those who wind up getting paid on the 15th and the 1st are doing all right compared to everyone else.
Yeah.
And so you hit these interesting snags in the system. And it's interesting. That's, I think, the best way to start pointing out the differences and all that, because the calendar originally had only 10 months in it, and they added a few more because it wasn't a good system, and because the Caesars said, hey, I want a month named after Caesar Augustus, so we'll call it August. And he went, oh, awesome, make it have 31 days because I'm the great Caesar, I should have like a huge month in it. And they said, okay, well, chop some off of February. No one's using days in February anyways, and next thing you know, you got 1 month with 28 days in it, when you could easily cut off a few 31 days and fill it up.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, like, I like Caesar, this idea of the Roman emperor who's also a bit of a social engineer, or is that? Yeah, I guess it's social engineer, because he's like creating a new calendar for people. I think Napoleon had a similar thought, but he never was able to add an extra month.
I just like to think instead of being social engineers, they knew it was not a perfect system. They said, okay, everyone's just going along with it, but I'm saying it. The calendar's flawed. We have to manually correct it every couple of years to make sure everything stays where it should. I don't know how to fix it perfectly, but I can do a little bit better. And so they keep trying. And that's how we started getting the system we have now. People just keep trying, okay, I think we can do a little better. Add a leap year every 4 years. And it's going to have an extra day in it. We'll put it in February because it's short.
And I think there was another Roman Empire who added letters. They're the Claudian letters. No, I'm probably wrong about that. Anyways, he added a couple letters to the alphabet. He's like,
he should have added a few more. He should have gone up, taken some stuff from the Vikings, because they got some really interesting things like a D with an X across the top. And
I think the Vikings are a little later than the Romans.
No, they were around the same. Oh, the language was around.
Precursors to Vikings, but I think they got their runes from
Well, they got their runes from Odin.
Oh, of course.
He gave it to them. I mean, come on. Right. It's clearly there. But they have some real nice things in their language for their alphabet that we don't have. I would have liked to have incorporated in.
Yeah.
Of course, mind you, I'm glad we got rid of that long S that always looks like an F when you're trying to read it. That was just annoying. And I'm glad we got rid of it. Yeah. That TH pronunciation that looks like a sideways hat from the Vikings, though, I would have liked to have seen that in there.
Yeah, the English should bring that back because we have so many words with "the" in them.
It would have been nice just to have one letter for that. But okay, whatever. We're at a decent enough system right now. I don't think we need to change it. Although we could go into length at adding emoticons for adding extra tonal levels about how you can say a sentence.
Oh yeah, okay.
Well, I just think there's something that we can be done to make it show like, okay, yeah, this is not a serious sentence. I added it, and punctuated it with a smiley face sticking out its tongue. That means I'm not serious about this. I'm being goofy. So that way you don't read it seriously. So in that case, emoticons actually do help.
Well, yes. I mean, we have them. They're called emoticons.
Well, yes, but they're not actually part of the alphabet.
Yes, we should add that.
A secondary alphabet to help denote emotional resonance for it.
Well, do you remember when Peter Griffin is playing Jeopardy? No, not Jeopardy. Wheel of Fortune, and he's guessing letters, and he's like, the bat signal, and what else did he say? Another Q.
I think there was like
X.
2 Q's in there at least.
The number 4.
And the bat signal. So we don't need to actually add something like the bat symbol into the alphabet, but I think there would be some interesting stuff there. Yes, getting back to the calendar systems.
Yeah.
It's heck, if you look back at history, I think the only ancient society that actually got it right were the Mayans, but they were using 2 calendars. They had the 365-day calendar. It was the vague year they called it. I don't know why. It was just the vague year calendar system. But they didn't have 12 months. They had 18 months. Each of those months had 20 days in it. And then at the end of the year, they had 5 unlucky days.
Okay.
I'm going to say there were the 5 unlucky days because they were days that could not fit into the other months, so they just didn't have good luck to start. If they were lucky days, they would have been in a month, right? But no, that's how they made their 365. It was good for agriculture. But they had another system, the sacred round calendar, that they used for auguries. Oh, okay, it's a good time to go to war. This is a good time for you to get married. Things like that. Best way to imagine that system is like picture 2 gears. One with the numbers 1 through 13 and the other one with 20 different words in it. And these cycled around until you came up to all 260 potential combinations. And that's how long that year was.
It must have been a nerd that came up with that.
There was somebody definitely thinking that day. Yeah. But it's not intuitive to how you and I picture it. Like you start off with 1 IMIX, but it doesn't go to 2 IMIX. It goes to 2 IK, then 3 Akbal. And that cycles through, but you do eventually get to the 2 IMIX and 3 IK and 4, and then you do get in the whole 260 days. You do get every potential combination, but it doesn't work in a way that you and I would imagine to be very cohesive.
Maybe not, but
the average person wasn't actually using it, so whatever. But yeah, these 2 formed the 52-year cycle, and that's how you get like their version of a century. It was only 52 years, but they had it. It was a bundle. Once the 2 systems synchronized again, okay, 1 bundle's over. That's your equivalent of a century, 52 years.
Yeah, all right.
Given that not a lot of people lived, longer than 52 years, I think it's about as equivalent as a century to us. You're not going to expect to say, oh, what century is this? Okay. I think I've got it all right now.
I like it, you mentioned before how we're very ingrained in our particular calendar. And we very much think of in terms of 19th century, 20th century, 6th century, 8th century, 10th century. We think in that way that history is so connected to those numbers, And yet, I guess, if you had a different calendar, those would be totally
Just
different.
try talking to someone from the Hebraic population. Their calendar's somewhere up in the, I think it's the high 5,000s
in the 5,000s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, the thing that helps ingrain a calendar into the minds is being able to synchronize it with some phenomenon you see. Our calendars work on the days. A day begins and ends, sort of thing, and it's very easy to tell one day from another. Sunrise, sunset, sort of thing, and then the night.
Yeah, although for some reason we split the day in the middle of the night. And we don't. In some cultures, they split the day at sunrise or sunset.
Well, I can see that working on the equator, because the sunrise is always going to be the same time every day. But if you go up to northern Europe, where the days can really start later on, depending on what part of the year you're in, I can understand why they said, screw it, we're making it in the middle of the night when most people are asleep, so it's not going to affect them. You just wake up the next day, and it's the next day. You're welcome.
Yeah, but you use the word like it's you used the word like, I don't know, did you say actual time, or the actual time that it is different? Because if you're like, I guess that's if you're using like mechanical time, like a clock or clockwork or something like that, then yeah, there's an actual time which would be clock time. But if that's your reference, like if the sun is your reference, then the actual time is always the same, because it's always sunrise, and sunset is always the same time.
Give or take.
Because that's how you define the time.
Well, see, that's the thing is the Sumerians had a way with that. For them, they had 12 hours in a day. 6 hours of that was the sunlight, 6 hours of that was the night. And so an hour was 1/6 of either the dark time or the light time. But because they based it on that, in the winter, the 6 hours of day were shorter.
Yeah.
And the 6 hours of night were longer, and thus it reversed again in the summer.
And it sounds weird to us, but I'm sure to them it's just...
So if you're working 4 hours a day there, that's the equivalent of 8 hours for us, on average.
Okay.
But those 4 Sumerian hours you're working, you have a lot extra. It's like, I get off work effectively easy in the winter because, those 4 hours are not long 4 hours. In the summer, you're working 4 hours out in the sun. That's a longer 4 hours. That's longer than hour 8.
But
it does cause some interesting problems that way.
Maybe some problems, but
if you're going to pay a person by how long they work, and salary type, then that starts getting kind of weird, and people start feeling a little angry on both sides about it. So
I guess so. I mean, in our modern era, we care very much about the minutes and the seconds and like mechanical time. Like we care about that. But in those days, they probably just paid people according to the day.
Pay you for a day's work, and then everyone just agreed that a day's work is from sunrise to sunset.
Sunset, yeah.
But you can imagine, near the depths of winter, even though, it's Sumerian winter, lots of snow there, they have it better than us here in Victoria. But in their winter, you can bet that the employers are feeling, why am I paying them a full, whatever it is they use for currency there, a day, when they're working less time than in the summer months? And the guys who are working there in the summer months, the employees are going, why are we only getting paid this 1 unit of money when our 1 day takes up more time than in the winter?
Yeah, maybe. But
or maybe they just didn't care that much. Maybe it was all, it's like, okay, I got this money, now I can have food. And so, it's like, okay, you got food, you got house, and you got, like a little playtime. Like, good enough.
Yeah. Well, and in some ways, like, they might have perceived a slight a difference between summer and winter, but at the same time, like, if you work from sunrise to sunset and you don't have a clock to look at, you have the sun to look at, you're like, oh yeah, the sun's up there, sun's over there, sun's over there. I don't think you'd feel the difference necessarily.
I don't know. I've always been able to sense, like, oh yeah, the winter days, that's quite short.
Yeah.
And the nights are just so long.
Yeah. But also, like...
Which is almost a shame, because, if you want a long night, you're going to want that in the summer. Because there's a lot more stuff you can do in a summer night than you can in a winter night.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I find the summer, like, is psychologically invigorating. Like, I think, as much as
that might
I
not
love
have
the
worked
rain
necessarily
and
for
winter.
the Sumerians. They, I'm sure they didn't have the summertime the same way we do.
Okay.
We're not, oh yeah, okay, summertime, let's go to the park. It's not really the same thing.
Yeah. Well, maybe not.
Well, because they didn't even have weeks in the Sumerian system.
Okay.
You see, so they worked off a lunar month with 29 or 30 days, and they marked the start of the month with the new moon, which is very nice way to tell for when you start. No moon up there, it's a new moon. There we go. Now we're starting up a new month.
Yeah.
So that actually only produced 254 days in the calendar year. And so they had to add an extra month, and then every 6 years they had a 62-day month. Because they're wacky. Wacky Sumerians.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was no week. The time off and holy days happened on the 1st, 7th, 15th of the month. And that was it. You have 3 days off a month. And yeah, it is a 29 or 30-day month. So clearly they had a much different work ethic than we perceive these days.
Yeah, well, I wonder too, like, I guess that society would have been agricultural, like, they would have been, like, tilling fields.
Oh yes, agriculture would be much more important to them than it is to us. Even though, let's face it, it's actually very important to us.
Yeah.
It's just not in the same way that it was so much incredibly essential to their lives.
Because we have, like, we think of farmer culture as, the farmer gets up at the crack of dawn or before, milks his cows or does whatever he does.
Collects the eggs from the chickens, milks the cows, puts the feed in for the whole horses and all that.
And works all the way till sunset, sometimes even beyond, and then, collapses at the end of the day.
Not until they've had a decent supper, have a quick bath, and then, maybe 20, 30 minutes in front of the TV to catch the news, and then off to bed.
Yeah, so I wonder if that culture basically extends all the way back to the dawn of agriculture.
Probably fairly closely. Closer than most people are willing to acknowledge, at least in the most important aspects of it.
Yeah. But of course,
things may have changed because, let's face it, the Sumerians, I don't think they had much for chickens. I think that came around during the Roman time when they imported it through the Silk Road from Asia.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't necessarily need to wake up early to get the eggs, which is a shame because I think the Sumerians would have loved eggs. And chicken seemed like a really good way of doing that. But, they didn't necessarily have the same animals. So the smaller things may have changed, like what you have to feed, They have oxen instead of cows. I think they had sheep and goats and all that. So, if you have the same sort of animals, it keeps close.
Yeah, I guess that would be a different sort of culture. The herding culture would be different. And that's something that's come up again and again in history is the herders versus the farmers. And they would have different calendars, too, because the herders have their own way of things to do depending on the season, and then it might not sync up with the people who are growing vegetables and grains.
Which is interesting, though, because really they're both very deeply essential to a quality of life issue for any civilization throughout time.
Yeah, it's good to have both because
you're going to definitely want to know when to start planting. Yeah. You're definitely going to want to know when to start breeding the animals, the calving season, so you can get more of them, and, for cows, when to make sure the milking thing stays up.
Yeah.
Because if you don't keep milking them, folks, the cows will dry up, and then they won't give more milk until after they've had another calf. And then you got to wean the calf off, and then you got to start the milking again. It's not a simple process, and I don't care what those Harvest Moon games tell you. You can't just bring a cow in from nowhere and just start milking it, and then forget about it for a while, and then start milking it again.
Why isn't this cow giving me any milk? It's a bull.
Yeah, trust me, it's giving you something, but that's not actually milk. That's an old joke. That predates the internet.
Probably it goes back all the way to ancient Sumeria.
I don't know, because the one I've always heard it told was as a blonde joke. So, I guess instead of tracing its way to Sumeria, maybe all the way up to Scandinavia?
Here's a question.
When
do you think blonde hair first started? Do you think the Neanderthals had something to do with blonde hair?
I'm reasonably certain if we check it up on the Wikipedia, we can find an answer to that.
Okay. We'll leave that as an exercise to the listener.
Yeah. Also check up red hair. While you're looking up the history of stuff, look that up. Look up some eye color stuff, too. It's nice to know your history.
Yeah, get lost in Wikipedia.
It's not a bad way to spend time. And honestly,
better than getting lost in TV tropes.
I don't know. I've found a lot of good stuff from doing the TV tropes reading. It's like, oh, wow, this thing sounds good. I'll actually give it a watch. And then next thing you know, I'm a fan. Mm-hmm. So, not necessarily bad, provided you learn when to stop, which is always the hardest thing. But yes, we've discussed a couple different calendar systems.
Yeah.
But they're all intrinsically tied to something in the real world. So this way, the real world gives the calendar some sort of substance.
Yeah, exactly.
Except for the sacred round count for the Mayan calendar. 260 days doesn't really sync up very well.
Okay.
But it's used for, like I said, auguries and, determining, like, okay, this is a good time for finding out what the future holds, or
well, there's something to be said for, like, mathematics and, like, combining prime numbers and factors and things. I don't see 260...
I don't know how you'd be able to predict when it's a good time to fight in a battle based off of numerology, though. Honestly, if you have to figure out when you want to fight the person, I think you've already lost. In the grander sense of things.
I don't know.
You committed to spending time, resources, and human lives in this sort of thing. I think you've lost, buddy.
All right.
In the grand epic sense of win and lose. But I think it works good for settings, fictions that have stuff like esoteric people, mages, and holy priests and all that. Because it really does show a different way of removing them from society. They don't follow the same calendar that you do, Mr. Farmer Man. They follow some sort of system that cycles. It only links up with yours every 52 years. Once in your life, you're going to be on the same part of the page as they are for the chapter of calendars.
Well, it is true that like the calendars we have in our world and history were developed by people like priests, basically, or monks of that that ancient Sumerian culture. And
I gotta say though, when it comes to the old calendar systems, I'm torn between saying good job and you guys suck. Because 350 days, when it's really a 365-day rotation, I mean, if you have some proper stones set up and you want to actually sit down and study this thing properly, you should be able to figure out, yes, it's so many days around before the sun starts rising at the same portion. Once you figure out the sun's not rising in the same spot every day, you can determine this as a system and figure out within the next year about how long it takes.
You think they should have used Stonehenge for something like that?
Any sort of system like that. Giant calendar system to determine, rises and settings.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we'll give it 5 years' time to properly work it, because I imagine it would be fairly difficult to get the stone in properly. It's like, okay, it's lined up just right for the setting of it on this day. Thanks for the work, you guys. That was a lot of work putting the men here in exactly where I wanted it in 2 hours' time.
Yeah, giant stones. I guess you'd have to start with some kind of stick version.
Yeah. Well, see, but the problem with sticks is that even over the course of a year, you can get some decent wear and tear on them. So stones are definitely a way to guarantee that you're doing it right.
Well, no, I mean, like, basically you do like a mock-up with sticks, and you get everything in the right place.
Although I suppose, if you got doing like a post-based system, you get the post in there. Okay, it's in the right spot. Now just make sure that the stone that we put in next to it lines up this way, and then we can get rid of it. Okay, so now, I'll give them 3 years to determine how many days are in a year. On the other hand, mathematically, 350 versus 365, that's about 96%, and that's pretty good. Yeah. You didn't get the number, but you were off by about 4%. And given the fact that you also had to make sure, you had to survive and live, and you had all these other chores, good work.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, 350 days, and you realized, because every once in a while you had to reset the system, sounds a little slipshod to me. So
I wonder what that person's other duties would be. Like that, if that person is a priest or a holy man, do you think they can just live in their monastery or whatever and just study? Or do you think then,
Well, for the monks, by the time you got around to medieval Europe, they had a lot of chores, a lot of praying. They were making their wines. But I think that leads all the more credence to you got to get this right. So if you want to get the wine aged properly, you're going to need to count how many days it takes to age it properly. You're going to start noticing things.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for putting theory into practice and not just sitting on your butt all day theorizing about it.
And that's why everybody loves Gregor Mendel. He had a theory about how plants looked like other plants if you crossed them properly, and that's how he came up with the genetics. All the genetics information we know started with one monk, a paintbrush, some bags of pollen, and an idea. So,
that's cool.
Thank you, Mr. Mendel. Now that was now if only all monks could be such intriguing scientists. Oh my goodness, how further ahead we would be.
Yeah. Well, and basically, like perhaps in our society, the scientist and engineer and mathematician have taken on many of the roles that used to be held by priests and holy men and witch doctors and those kind of guys.
I wonder if there are more scientists than the standard population who do their own homebrew alcohols.
Oh, probably, yeah. I don't know who does.
Because on the one hand, it's like, this is simple chemistry. Make sure you clean out the products properly, add this, ferment this, and hey, it all works out. Now I got some sweet booze.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like what the monks were doing, too, with their wines. So I can see a nice sense of connection there.
Yeah, it's a good idea to try. I mean, not for me, because I'm against farming, but... Well,
when I lost the job at the lab, one of the first places I started looking around was the U-brew places. Because I know about proper sterilization of equipment and how bad improperly sterilized equipment can ruin things down the road. I was dealing with a lot of sensitive tissues. You get just one little microbe into the your petri plates, and bam, 48 hours later, mold everywhere. And not even the mold you really see. Oh my goodness, there was some molds that would make you sick. There was stuff there's something on your skin that winds up producing like a weird kind of off pinkish bloody kind of mold. We had a contamination issue once. We had to wind up going to a warehouse and searching and getting rid of all the contamination. There were so many colors you have never seen. It was like if the rainbow was made out of vomit. This is what the colors you would see. And on the one hand it was nauseating and disgusting. On the other hand it was fascinating. And we were only down the street from a couple of eateries. So why not for lunch go get some calamari? I'm doing fine. How about you guys? Oh, you're not eating anything? Why aren't you guys hungry? So. Scientist minds sometimes come out ahead in that case.
Yeah.
But yeah, so an esoteric calendar system works very nice for people that are somehow above or removed from the essentials of society. A farmer needs to know when to plant the crops, needs to know when to start breeding the animals. A mage does not need such things. A mage works on a calendar system that is removed from the cycles of growth.
Yeah, well, it might be based on, like, elementals, like the elements, or, like, maybe the zodiac, perhaps?
A zodiac is a very nice way of doing it, especially if you can work into a system where the zodiac actually plays some effect with the people who are born under the sign.
Yeah. Or
which is a very nice trope in a lot of books and novels. You were born under the sign of this, so you will become bold and foolhardy, but still do great things.
I guess technically the zodiac is sort of connected to the agricultural calendar because it's based on the year, but it precedes, and that's so.
I don't know how far it precedes, because there seems to be a nice history of farmers at the end of the day just going up onto the roof of their house and watching the stars go by and looking at them. Huh. Heck, everyone used to love doing that. Before you had stuff like TV and you're in that nice area where a summer's night is too oppressive to be in the house. You want to sleep on top of it. That was the thing to do, man. And everybody saw the same program, so you can talk about it later on. You're in the fields. Did you see that thing go shooting across the sky last night? Yeah, that was amazing. Next thing you know, someone breaks their leg. It was a sign of ill omen. And bam, that's how comets get linked with bad luck. So, there you go.
Thought, yeah.
Just wonderful things like that.
I like how comets are a sign of ill omen before people even think of things like aliens and like maybe
getting hit by them,
hit
Earthfall,
or maybe it's a UFO. It's a bright light in the sky. Obviously, something bad is going to happen, or good, or
the sky was something so almost immutable.
Yeah,
it's always there. Sure, it shifts around a little bit. Sometimes you can only see some constellations sometime in the year, but they're always back. They're eternal. And when something changes up there, like you see something shooting. That's something changing. Something seems very wrong.
And I guess if your knowledge is a little incomplete, like if you have a little bit of knowledge of it, like somebody told you some stories about it, or told you like, oh, that's Polaris and that's this other constellation.
This is how you determine which way goes up on the map.
Then it can be a little mysterious if like out, in another town or out there somewhere, like, in the big universities in the cities, in Vienna, people know actually, they can predict the movement of the stars and planets. And like if they don't predict it, something's wrong with the world.
That is a very nice way of looking at it. Which, by the way, I think is something people should think of including more often in their stories, in their game settings.
Oh yeah.
Celestial phenomenon, man.
Yeah, because that world is different from ours in that you can see the sky often. Well, depending on where you live in the world, but many of us live in cities where it's
in many of the cases there are divine figures, so that does mean something.
And it means something. Yeah.
I remember in the first books of the Dragonlance series, the constellations disappeared from the sky when the gods manifested on Earth, their Ansalon, their equivalent
cool.
to Earth, not actual Earth.
Yeah.
But so that was kind of very interesting. You know which gods are in the celestial realms and which gods are on the ground based on what constellations are, not there.
Yeah.
So that was kind of groovy, I gotta say.
Yeah.
But okay, let's figure this for some other stuff. Because in Star Trek, they had to work on a calendar system that didn't have based on the solar system.
Right.
Let's work on something else. You can have the solar calendar, like we do. You can have a lunar calendar, like the Hebraic people do. What about people that don't have any of that? What about dwarves? What about like the people that are supposed to live under the earth all the time, like those underground fairy realms?
Right, as I always say to you, dwarves don't have to live underground.
No,
but okay, for the ones who
they
do.
are the most humanoid example of
yeah.
things. So they're easier to transition mentally to the people because they're gruff bearded people that live under the earth.
Yeah.
But conceivably, they could spend their decades under the earth mining before they come out and actually see things. Because there's nothing to mine up here. Going back down where the gold is. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
There's other things too. I suppose the Drow elves are a very good example of only coming up sometimes.
I think there would have been a fair amount of mythology. Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar as I'd like to be with what's been written about Drow culture and how they measure time. But I think that must. Somewhere there must exist. Somebody's thought about it.
But yeah, they don't have the same sort of sense of time for hours because they don't have a giant glowing ball moving over top of their heads.
Yeah, you're very right.
They don't have any moon stuff. Although I would like to see or figure out if the large underground lakes and oceans that they keep mentioning underground actually have tidal phenomenon.
Well, they say they're large, but I mean that's relatively speaking. I don't think they're much larger than some of our smaller lakes, and obviously
they don't experience much tidal phenomenon.
Lakes don't have too much tides. It'd be cool if there was an underwater ocean. I don't know how big of a lake you need to have tides. Does Hudson's Bay have significant tides? I don't know.
Yes, it does. It has tides. Well, anything that's connected to the oceans has tides.
Does Lake Superior have tides? That's what I'd like to know.
I believe they do experience some, but not to the same degree. Okay. So yeah, when you get down to the lake size, it's ripples constitute more effect. Mm-hmm. That kobold that just splashed down and cannonballed in there produces more significant displacement than the tidal phenomenon.
All right. I'm curious now. Does the do the poles have tides?
They do experience something similar, but not quite the same.
Because imagine, the ice on the North Pole would, rise and fall, according to...
Well, that's why it's able to build up so much there. It's, because the moon pulls at it, it will have a tide, but nowhere near the sense that you see elsewhere.
Because I don't think the moon would ever pull directly, on the tides on the North Pole, but might have an effect.
It pulls from, a 90-degree angle, effectively. And so that causes some, but it's definitely not the same as what we see in, the Bay of Fundy. Where you get 9 feet plus sometimes, depending on how things go.
That's not because of the angle. That's just because of the geography of that bay.
Which
also funnels.
Also explains parts of the underground lakes, because the water would have to come from somewhere to swell up or down.
Okay,
in which case, a lake, you could determine it only when the moon is on an angle where you say that this edge of the lake is slightly lower than the other one. But like I said, a couple kobolds splashing around it can produce enough displacement that you will not be able to detect it.
But if there was an underdark lake, in the land of the Drow or whatever, that was maybe connected to a surface lake somehow, that maybe there could be tides. I admit that might be stretching it though. It's probably not case.
Have a ravine on the one side with a decent lake that produces throughout the whole thing. No, it would still have to be really, really big to produce that. So
Plus,
even
if
tidal phenomena,
it was connected to surface lakes, then it would flood, obviously, right?
well, seasonally, as for the rest of the lake, if it's all connected, like I'm thinking all in the same layer. Otherwise, yeah, all the surface lake drains into the bottom lake.
Yeah.
So.
And that's the other question. Like, I was wondering if, since we're speculating about the Underdark, if, like, I don't know if the Underdark and the Overworld are connected by, like, hydrological systems, and I have to wonder sometimes.
Well, I think it's done best in the Forgotten Realms, where they divide the Underdark into 3 areas.
Okay, yeah.
So you get your really deep Underdark with your really twisted things, your moderate Underdark with, like, the Drow Elves, and your upper Underdark with, the things that raid the surface more often.
Right. And the upper would actually exchange
I
water.
think it would have more of a
surface.
hydrological cycle, whereas the stuff down below, it's very weird and very unnatural, so probably not.
So for that upper part of the Underdark, if you lived there, you would have wet seasons and dry seasons based on
likely something like that, although it may be more of a slow flood and a dry season.
I guess because water would be more consistently in aquifers and stuff. Basically, water's there year round.
I really don't
right?
think aquifers matter much in a fantasy setting like D&D, where people are digging every darn which way it seems.
Yeah, I guess.
So things get really weird when you start thinking about like people living down there, but they clearly don't have a sun or a moon to base their system on.
Right. Yeah.
So I was thinking for dwarves, the dwarven calendar would likely have an agricultural base off of whatever mushrooms they're growing. If it takes so many, such a length of period of time before a mushroom will grow to a certain size, then you can have so many growing periods in a year, and that's how they mark the years. It's based on how many crops they can cycle through. Which I think is about the best I've been able to come up with as an idea for how they base their system of time around. There's natural fatigue, but dwarves typically seem to be the kinds that would not admit, oh yes, I'm the weakest dwarf, I need sleep now. So now we end our working day. So maybe they'd have something like a 36-hour day, and that's just because dwarves will start collapsing after a certain point of time.
You know what would be really cool to have in like a fantasy setting would be like a stalactite clock. But I don't know if I think normally stalactites don't necessarily grow at the
rate
that you want.
But the dripping of the water off of them could be could be a nice way to determine the seconds.
Yeah.
And then maybe the rest of the clock would just have the calendar system would have to be imported from somebody that does see the sun. And thus, if the dwarves want to trade properly with the humans when they're going, they have to go up to the system every so many days, and they got one guy who determines days by counting the drips.
But stalactites at the fastest, they can grow centimeters per year, right?
Yeah. Or then you'd have to do something like truncate it, every so often when it touches down, and then the whole dripping system would change differently.
Or you could like if you were a good cave sculptor, you could sculpt like a slope, kind of like an upside down slope, and have like you make a notch so that it drips off this first little bit, and then when it reaches the ground, you make a second notch, or basically or maybe you'd start at the end. And you'd work your way back up. So you'd start a new notch and start a new drift. So you'd have a different, like a stalactite, a spike for each, 12 years, 100 years, 100-year spike.
So instead of like the bundles like the Mayans had for their 2 calendar systems, marking for their equivalency of a century, they would have they call it a full growth.
Oh yeah.
So as just a name to pull out. Yes. I've been alive for 2 full growths. I am a full dwarf.
Yeah.
So that's not a bad way of helping determine time for them.
Can you imagine, like, instead of a lot of humans in real world plant a tree when a kid is born? Like that's sort of what they do. Can you imagine, like, if dwarves they start a new stalactite growing? Like this is, symbolize
the growth of a dwarf. I think that would be very interesting because of the speed dwarves mature. If you have just enough right size ceiling, sort of thing for it, you could wind up saying you're not a mature dwarf until your stalactite touches the ground.
Yeah.
And that's when we'll celebrate your maturation.
Yeah.
As good as any.
And then you're rooted at that point.
Oh, I like it.
become a part of
I think
the
there's some
plan.
good symbolism in there. It might be interesting to sit down and start working this out into greater depth and detail. Put out as a nice little free PDF for people to pick up and think about.
So there's many more
Yes.
things to be said about this.
All sorts of
Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
Because we utilize the minute system.
Yes, we count very carefully.
We
the
never
minutes and
even
the
got
seconds.
to the metric clock.
So we're hoping that our listeners will have also wonderful thoughts about calendars and different ways and expressions, and please share them with us, and we may read your comments on the podcast, or maybe
Or at least
we'll
reply to them as best as we can.
respond to them. But if you have thoughts on anything else, thesimulationist@gmail.com is our address. We're on Facebook, and we're on, just type us into your search engine, you'll find us, The Simulationist.
We got some stuff up over in the iTunes store. You can't really contact us that way. You can listen to our stuff, but
there is a review section. That would help us a lot if you could write us a review. Give us as many stars as you feel we deserve.
But yes, if you do want to ask a question, it's probably better to use one of the other methods.
Contacting us is...
Otherwise, it's fairly one way that doesn't really connect up the same way. C'est la vie. Not every system's perfect. We learned that with the calendars today. I mean, come on. And
One day, though, there will be the holodeck, and it will take over all other media.
Maybe.
Okay.
There's probably going to be like a neo-hipster culture that just eschews that. I prefer the reading style with my old-fashioned... Oh, God damn, it just suddenly cooked in. Jean-Luc Picard is like a neo-hipster.
Yes.
He's going for all the retro stuff. Oh, man. He just totally went down a peg in my eyes.
Oh, well, there's nothing necessarily wrong with hipsters.
No, but it just hit me. It's like, oh no, he's not doing that potentially because he likes the older style. What if he's doing it because it's bucking the trend of oh yes, got to be all future. You can't have a real fish in here. You got to have hollow fish.
Well, I guess that's a discussion for another time.
Oh. Man, I'm going to have to think deep on this one. Okay, we got to end this now.
Okay, I've been Josh Levin, and send us money, as always.
My mind's still been blown. Take care.